ICRC delegation, Mr. Tremblio, Dr. Amir Nawaz Khan, the founder director of CDPM, Brigadier Fayaz Hussain Shah, senior capacity building specialist from IDMC, Sayyid Shahid Kazmi, program manager from CCA, and lastly, Prof. Sabat Khel, DG PDMA, the faculty of the University of Peshawar, honorable international and national delegates, and particularly the students of Center for Disaster Management. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference, I would say that gives me a greatest pleasure to inaugurate today, this morning, not only because this conference is being arranged by one of my very old colleague, long-lasting colleague, about 40 years of association, when we were students at the Department of Geology at the University of Peshawar, Professor Dr. Noor Jahan, but also because this subject is very close to my heart. Professor Amir Nawaz was giving the history of the origin of the Center for Disaster Preparedness and Management at the University of Peshawar. One thing which he forgot to mention was that why this center was specially chosen to be located at the University of Peshawar. The reason was that by the time GTZ and EC mode, they decided to establish a center at the University of Peshawar. At that very time, the University of Peshawar had already achieved a specific position, a specific recognition at the national level for the research in climate change and natural hazards. It is always a pleasure for a Vice Chancellor of the University of Peshawar. When we look at our resources at the University of Peshawar, we have one of the oldest department of geography where there has been lots of study going on with respect to climate, and recently there is lots of study going on the floods. We have Department of Geology and the National Center of Excellence in Geology, where their state-of-the-art research is going on for quite some time on all kinds of natural hazards, particularly on earthquakes, landslides, slope instability, and floods. And then we have, since many years, we have the Department of Environmental Sciences located at this center. I remember one of my colleague, Professor Dr. Hamidullah, he was pioneer of environmental sciences research at the University of Peshawar. And at that very time, in late 80s, nowhere in Pakistan, any research was being conducted in the fields of environmental sciences. So at the University of Peshawar, we are really proud to have all these resources which are specifically geared towards studies about climate change, adaptation, and about the natural hazards and disaster management. So when in 2009 it was decided that there will be a Center for Disaster Preparedness and Management, the University of Peshawar was chosen because of all these resources which were already at the University of Peshawar. So, but my compliments go to the founder director and the current directors for taking this center to current status of one of the leading centers for disaster preparedness and management in the country. I will share with my students, particularly from the Department of Disaster Management, that climate change is the latest player in the field of natural hazards and disasters. Pakistan, by virtue of its location in the Karakoram and the Himalayas and the western mountains, has been always prone of natural hazards. Because nowhere in the world we have those steep mountains such as we have in Pakistan. Nowhere in the world we have continuous collision between the plates going on, which is giving us repeated earthquakes in the history of Pakistan, resulting in some of the biggest disasters in the world. What is happening now, that with the growing population, expansion of the urban areas, we are now occupying those areas which are otherwise prone to disasters. So that is, this pressure of growing population is adding to the natural hazards and disasters. And the latest player is the climate change. What is climate change all about? If you look at the budget of the climate change, it is measured by the value of the carbon dioxide in the air. Being a geologist and knowing the history of the earth for past many million years, we know that the earth has been fluctuating in terms of its global temperatures right in the past. The amount of the carbon dioxide has been changing in the past. But what has happened in past about 200 years, that average, which was about 270 parts per million to 300 parts per million, that has been exceeded gradually, and now it has reached around 400 parts per million. And what's the consequence of that? But before I go into the consequence, where is this carbon dioxide coming, which is increasing the temperature? It is because of all those carbon resources which were hidden under the surface of the earth. They were brought to the surface through excavation, through deep drilling. The coal, the gas, the petroleum, which have been source of power to the automation of the industry since about 1760, starting in Britain and then expanding into the Europe and North America. So this industrial revolution needed power, and these carbon dioxide, these carbon resources which were hidden under the crust of the earth, when they were excavated and they were brought out and they were fed into as a source for power into these major industrial plants, that increased the carbon dioxide levels, and they are continuously rising in the atmosphere. So these greenhouse gases, what's the consequence of that? The consequence is that temperatures are rising up to 1 degree centigrade. Average temperature has risen until now, and there are predictions that it will go up to 2 degrees centigrade rise by the middle of this century. And what is happening with that? Glaciers are melting. I have personally witnessed in the Karakoram Himalayas that many villages, they have been devastated because their source of water, which was coming from the glaciers, that has vanished because glaciers have gone down and they are no more at that level to provide them the water. So there are many consequences that you can see because of the glacial melting. There is a greater flow of water in the rivers, there are greater floods, and beside that, the biggest mass of ice, one is in the Karakoram ranges, which is called third pole, and also at the Arctic, that is decreasing by millions of tons. And another consequence is rising sea level. So all these things which are because of the global warming, rising temperatures, they are adding up to the natural scenario of hazards which we inherited because of the physiographic conditions of this country. The landslides which we had, they are being aggravated. There is a greater number of landslides which is increasing day by day. If you look at the most recent glacier, the inventory of the glaciers, our glaciers are receding except for some few in the Karakoram ranges. So all these things are adding up to the overall scenario that the natural hazards are becoming more and more devastating in the country. We heard about that the drought is rising. We heard about the weather is getting extreme. So all these are the signs of the global warming and associated enhancement in the natural hazards. So what we need to do at the university, as I already shared with you, that the University of Peshawar is best placed in terms of its resources when we are talking about the climate change, when we are talking about the natural disasters. What we need to do is we have to develop interaction between various centers located at the center. I regret to share with you that there is very little cooperation between the various departments located on the university campus. So what I want, my request to all these geology department, the environmental sciences department, the Center for Disaster Preparedness, the Center of Excellence in Geology, so all of them, they get together and they work on a common agenda. So that because this university has to give leadership to the country in the fields of climate change, adaptation and natural hazard mitigation. I am here these days and until I am at this university, my doors are open to all these departments and I look forward to that there will be a day that we shall have a common agenda and very comprehensive agenda, well thought out agenda for preparing ourselves and to contributing to these agencies like ICRC and the NDMA, the PDMA, so all these, and then to the community, particularly the communities who are suffering at the hands of these enhancing natural hazards. I welcome recently one of the young colleagues from the Department of Environmental Sciences, Dr. Asif came out with an initiative to establish a Center for Climate Change Research at the University of Peshawar. And I extended my full cooperation to that. And we shall, with all these resources, we shall very soon get into developing a Center for Climate Change Research. So with these words, I thank the organizers of this conference to arrange this particular and very interesting theme, a very timely initiative, and particularly inviting people from different disaster management agencies in the country, the international disaster-related agencies, and particularly the academia from various universities and the students from disaster management and other departments from the University of Peshawar. Thank you very much.